Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing some tech work on a B series. I know some of you have asked for the specifics on how to adjust valves. So we're going to be utilizing a B series that I built for a local guy, and we're going to adjust the valves on it and show you how I do it. So here we have a LS vtec GSR head, B18 A1 bottom end. It's a CSS bottom end, forged pistons, rods, stock cams, SuperTech head package, stock cam gears, ACL oil pump with a OEM timing kit. So tensioner, water pump, and belt. And yeah, so fresh build, 0 miles. I just got the head slapped on it yesterday, and everything is ready to be timed. Everything is timed and everything's ready for adjustment as far as valves go. Tools that I use are going to be a flathead screwdriver, this doesn't have to be this, you can use a coat hanger, a TIG wire, you can use a 1/4 inch extension if it's long enough, but you just want something that you can shove down into the cylinders and measure the height of the piston. A feeler gauge, you're going to need something that goes low enough to get 6 thou to 8 thou. For a vtec head, you're going to want to use an extended reach 45-degree feeler gauge, but it's not mandatory. This just makes life a little easier. I actually broke my 6 thou 45 feeler gauge, so I'm going to be using this set of straight gauges that I modified a little bit. But yeah, you're going to need 6 to 7 thou is the intake spec. I use 7 because I'm a big advocate on I'd rather be loose than tight. So especially on a turbocharged engine, things get really hot, and with heat you have thermal expansion. So we're going to use a 7 thou 0.007 intake feeler gauge and a 0.007 to 0.008 feeler gauge for the exhaust side. Again, intake is 0.006 to 0.007 and exhaust is 0.007 to 0.008. I use 7 thou for intake, 8 thou for exhaust. And then lastly, we have the Amazon special here. This was fairly cheap. Don't buy it off of a tool truck. It's going to be significantly more expensive that way. I'll put a link in the description for something like this. You can get it off of eBay, Amazon, whatever. But yeah, this is just a Honda vtec head valve adjustment tool. So you have a nut driver for the handle, and then you have a screwdriver that just goes through the center of it, and you're going to see why this is so important here for the vtec head here in a second. If things are backwards, flip-flopped for you in these videos, I'm sorry. I'm using the front face camera on my phone. My GoPro is dead, so I'm charging that. But you're going to want 19 millimeter or whatever crank pulley socket size you have. OEM is 19 mil, and extended reach ratchet. What we're going to do is we're going to start on top dead center. So it's going to be cylinder 1 is at the utmost highest position. Again, cylinder 1 is going to be the cylinder closest to the timing kit or the timing belt on most engines. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 being the farthest away. So closest to the transmission. What we're going to do is we're going to take our identifier rod, that's what I like to call it, just anything to shove right into the cylinder. Again, we moved all of the spark plugs out, so we have no spark plugs in this engine. And we're going to make sure that this engine is timed correctly mechanically and set it to the cylinder 1. So we have our up marks, and then we have our side marks on each part of the cam gears. So we're going to rotate this engine counterclockwise. This is the natural rotation of this engine. And if you're in doubt on any engine, on what engine rotation it has, you're going to rotate the belt into the tensioner, not away from the tensioner, because you want to feed the slack into the tensioner, right? And that way the tensioner has the ability to do its job and keep the belt tight. Because if you go the opposite way and you're pulling slack away from the tensioner and you're putting it on the other side, that's when the belt can loosen up and it can skip a tooth, skip timing. So just good habit, good healthy habit to rotate the correct direction for these engines. So again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to watch our identifier rod. Once this is all the way up in its highest position, we're going to verify that the camshafts are in TDC, top dead center. And if you have a lower cover and a crank pulley, you can establish the TDC marks there as well. But I'm not running a crank pulley or a lower cover on this, so we're just going to be watching this here. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to TDC here. We're going to watch this rod and make sure that it's at its point of highest travel. Which is about right there. So it does not go up any higher than that on the crankshaft. And if you look here, I marked these with paint. These two marks here are going to be little slots in the cam gears. Those are lined up together. Our up marks, I painted those in white. Those are facing up. And then our outside slot marks, I also painted yellow, are going to be in line with the surface of this head here, where the valve cover gasket rides. And the most important thing that we're looking for here is the cylinder 1 cam lobes on TDC are going to be facing at a 45-degree angle, much like this, on both exhaust and intake. So exhaust lobes are going to look like this. Intake lobes are going to look identical, almost a mirror image there. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adjusting the rocker arm to camshaft clearance. That is what a valve adjustment is going to be on this engine here. So again, you got 4 valves per cylinder, 2 valves per cam. So intake cams, you're going to have, these 2 valves. Exhaust, you're going to have 2 valves. And we're going to adjust the intakes to 7 thou. And we're going to adjust the exhaust to 8 thou. Now this is where this tool really comes in handy here. What this allows you to do is get deep into the valve train there. And you can't really do that with a straight combination wrench. You can do it with a socket and a ratchet, but it's really hard to hold that adjustment screw as you are tightening this thing up to spec on the rocker arm there. So this is going to come in handy. I'll explain the process to you, and then I'll just kind of do it for you on the next cylinder, or even cylinder 1, and then you can kind of just see how I do it, because doing this one-handed, it's going to be extremely difficult. But what I do is I break all of these nuts loose on the cylinder you're working on, and then I use a flathead screwdriver to adjust the valves to spec. So for exhaust side, we're using the 8 thou feeler gauge. There's 2 ways you could do this. One is a surefire way, but it's extremely difficult to get in there. And what that is you kind of come in here
underneath the tappet of the rocker and then on the top side of the valve itself. And you can slide this feeler gauge in there, and that is the surefire way of adjusting these rocker arms, right? So just like that, and you want the least amount of drag possible. Again, that's why you have extended reach feeler gauges here, for specifically that reason. So when you get the feeler gauge in there, you just want a slight bit of drag, not too much, but not too little. And it's very important that when you're doing these valve adjustments, you have the same amount of drag on each adjustment that you do. If you have variations in tolerances, that could be no good. So again, you're going to do that for both valves. And this is kind of hard to do with one hand. Sometimes you have to pull up on the rocker arm and slide the feeler gauge in that way. But you get the idea. That is the method one. This is the method that I typically use, just because you get a more finite measurement. It's more rock solid. Otherwise, the lazy man's way, which is less accurate, but it's going to get you pretty darn close in the ballpark where you want to be, is you kind of just measure from the top face of the rocker to the bottom of the lobe of the camshaft there. And again, you just want a little bit of drag, just like that, but not too much. I already adjusted cylinder 1, intake and exhaust, so we're going to go ahead and move to cylinder 3. That's going to be next up in the sequence. So the way we're adjusting this is cylinder 1, TDC, they're going to rotate the crankshaft a quarter turn, and cylinder 3 is going to be TDC at that point. Then we're going to measure cylinder 3. Another quarter turn on the crankshaft is going to be cylinder 4. That'll be TDC. And then the final quarter turn on the crankshaft is going to be cylinder 2. And I will show you what that looks like here. So, like I said, I already adjusted cylinder 1. So we're going to go cylinder 3 because we know that's next up in line here. And again, we're going to be watching this here, but equally, we're going to be watching the camshaft gears as well. The up mark is going to be right here on the exhaust side. Same thing with the intake cam gear. The up mark is going to be facing the exhaust side as well. So we're going to rotate this again counterclockwise until cylinder 3 is all the way up. Cylinder 3 is all the way up on our stick, and then the up mark is facing exhaust. Intake cam up mark is facing exhaust. That is 1/4 degree at the camshaft. That's important. 1/4 degree at the camshaft, not the crankshaft. So our exhaust and intake cam lobes, again, are doing this. So we have our intake cam lobes are facing this direction, and then our exhaust is facing this direction here. So now I'll go ahead and show you how I do it in real time, maybe speed up the video a little bit. But we're going to loosen the nuts, and then we're going to stick our feeler gauges in there and then adjust the adjustment screws until we have some slight drag on the feeler gauges. One thing I like to do is I like to loosen the nuts, but I like to not snug them back up, but I like to get them tightened back up to the point where if I just turn it a 1/4 turn, that nut's going to be pretty snug. That's going to make adjustment a lot easier as well, but it's not necessary. So I'll stick my feeler gauge in there, and then I loosen or tighten this adjustment screw until that feeler gauge is nice and snug. And I got lucky on this one. It's actually pretty darn snug there. Yeah, so if I tighten it just a little bit more, I can't move the feeler. But if I back it up just a hair, then it's tightened up pretty good there. So now that I've done that with the screwdriver, what I do is I'll stick the feeler gauge back in there and then take this guy here, right? And while you're tightening, if you tighten the screwdriver with the nut, you can gain, you can decrease the clearance and therefore tighten up the feeler gauge. So right now we're a little loose on the feeler gauge, so I'm just going to take the screwdriver and the nut driver and tighten them both. So I'm tightening the nut as well as adjusting the screw at the same time. It's a little trick that I picked up on over the years, and it just kind of helps making the adjustment a lot quicker and smoother. And again, this is if you're doing the poor man's method, or sorry, the lazy man's method. If you adjust it underneath the tappet of the rocker, you won't be able to do this because you're putting pressure down on the rocker, and therefore you're going to be throwing off the clearance on top of the valve. So right there, we're pretty tight. I'm going to go just a little bit more. Yeah, and that's a good amount of drag right there. So again, I'm going to come in here, and again, you don't want to be coming up and pushing down like this, because now you're side loading the feeler gauge, and you don't want to be down too far because you're again side loading the feeler gauge. You're going to try to get in line with the feeler gauge. You want to go straight in and out, get a straight shot. And right here, very good clearance there. That feels good. It's just a slight bit of drag. You can feel the feeler gauge. It's not so tight where you can't move the feeler gauge, but it's not so loose to where you're not feeling the drag on the feeler gauge. So this one I'm going to call good, and we're going to go ahead and tighten that up and repeat the process for the other valve. And for this here, all I do is I put counter tension on the screwdriver as I'm tightening it so that the set adjustment screw doesn't tighten as I'm tightening the nut. And again, just a slight amount of drag. So always double check your work, triple check if you're unsure. Usually I check 3-4 times per valve, just so I am 100% confident that, again, like I mentioned in cylinder 1, all valves are going to feel the same. You're going to want to have the same amount of drag per valve. That's important. It's the details that matter when it comes to stuff like this. And again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the final torque spec for these nuts is going to be 14 foot-pounds. So what I do is I usually snug these up. I tighten them all up by hand, and then at the very end, I just make sure they're at least 14 foot-pounds. If you over-tighten them, you can stretch or damage the adjustment screw. And you don't want that. That's gonna suck. So you just got to make sure you're not cranking these suckers down so tight to where you're damaging the set screw itself. But I got a pretty good feel by hand, or I can adjust these pretty tight, and then I usually come in with a torque wrench, and I'm just a smidge under what the 14 foot-pounds it requires is. So I just make sure I go through after I'm done with all the adjustments and tighten them all up to at least 14 foot-pounds. So now we're going to move on to this one here, and then we're going to do the intake side at 7th thou. So again, exhaust side 8th thou, intake side 7. So now we're on the intake side. Again, I'm going to do the same process, just kind of time lapse it just a smidge, so you kind of understand the concept from there. So here we are back in the rotation phase. So we have cylinder 1 and cylinder 3 adjusted. So first we did 1, then we did 3. Now we're going to do 4, because that is the firing order on this. 1, 3, 4, 2, right? So 1's done, 3's done. We're going to go ahead and do another counter rotation at the camshaft. So the up marks are going to be facing down now, but we're going to be watching our identifier around here for piston travel height. Right there. So this is as high as this piston will go. We have our painted marks on the side. Our side marks are now facing each other. Our up marks are facing down. And our camshaft lobes are at a 45, exhaust and intake. So with cylinder 4 at TDC, we're going to go ahead and start adjusting. Okay, got cylinder 4 is now adjusted. So we have 1, 3, 4 all adjusted. So we're going to go ahead and finish this puppy off with yet another quarter turn. So again, our up marks were down, and now we're going to be towards the intake side. Both up marks towards the intake side. And don't forget our little identifier here. Slide that into the old doohickey and rotate it. And again, watch the identifier, make sure it's at its point of highest travel. Which that should be about, I think I went too far. I said don't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Go back just a smidge. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but when I was going clockwise, this exhaust side of the belt was starting to bunch up right here, and it would have slipped timing. So that's about it right there. So now cylinder 2 cam lobes intake side are at a 45, exhaust side are at a 45. Our up marks are now facing intake side, and our identifier is all the way up, so we know piston on cylinder 2 is at its height, the farthest height of travel upwards. So this is our last and final cylinder to be adjusted, so we'll adjust that, and then we should be done with the adjustment phase, and then it's just a matter of double checking our work. All right, so I went ahead and rotated it back to TDC cylinder 1. Again, we adjusted 1, 3, 4, and 2, 8th thou for the exhaust, 7th thou for the intake. Always double check your work. So it doesn't hurt to spend the extra, 10, 15 minutes to go through the process again. Check the exhaust, check the intake, cylinder 1, 3, 4, and 2, and just go about the steps again. You know, it's not going to be as time consuming because you're not doing any adjustments unless they're needed. But again, just double checking your work goes a long way. You have peace of mind. Customer has peace of mind. It's just done correctly. So other than that, not much more to it. This is the way it's going to be sent out. Customer has to bring a valve cover for this, so I'm just going to throw some plastic over it. But valves are adjusted. I mean, there's not much more to it than that. It's pretty simple. It's just getting a good feel for all the valves, the feeler gauges, and making sure that everything is consistently the same and consistently accurate per valve. Right? So when you do a lot of these, you start getting a good feel for that same initial feeling. And another reason why I like to go a little bit on the looser side of the factory spec, so say 7 to 8 on intake exhaust, and I'll go ahead and go 8 thou on the exhaust, because if you have just slightly too much drag on that feeler, it's not going to make a big difference as long as it's consistent with the rest of the valves. Just having a little bit too much drag is fine, because you are allowed to have down to 7 thou of a clearance. So again, just little things like that. It's the way that I do it. Other people probably have different methods of doing it. I showed you the lazy way of doing it, but like I said, there is a much more, in my opinion, proper way to do it if you have those extended 45-degree feelers where you can get underneath the rocker and on top of the valve, and you can get a better, more accurate clearance check there. But you know, I've been doing it the lazy man way for years and I've never had an issue. So take it for what it's worth. You know the method. Get out there and do it. So that's that. Any questions, concerns, comments, anything, all is welcome. I don't mind it. It all helps out in the end. Like, subscribe, share, the whole thing, man. I appreciate it. Until next time.